Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. That truck was reported stolen.
By who? When? Give me a case number.
I'm not giving you anything. I said step away. Hands where I can see them. Sheriff.
I'm going to need your name, your badge number, and the legal basis for this stop. All three, right now.
Who in the hell do you think you are?
They tried to arrest the wrong woman at a gas station. She was 28 years old. She was black. She was alone. And the sheriff who pulled up on her that afternoon, with his hand on his belt and his voice full of certainty, had absolutely no idea who he was dealing with. By the time he figured it out, it was already too late. His career was over. A federal investigation had been opened, and the footage, all of it, was already on its way to Washington. This is the story of Special Agent Maya Renee Carter, and it starts the way the best stories always do. Not with a hero, but with a moment that made one. Sheriff Dale Briggs pulled into that gas station like he owned it, because for 22 years in Harlow County, Georgia, he basically did. He stepped out of his cruiser slowly, deliberately, the kind of slow that's meant to communicate power. He looked at the black SUV at Pump 3. He looked at the woman standing beside it. And without asking a single question, without running a single plate, without doing one thing that resembled actual police work, he made up his mind. He walked toward her and said, "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. That truck was reported stolen." Maya Carter looked at him. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She said, "By who? When? Give me a case number." Briggs wasn't used to that. He said, "I'm not giving you anything. Step away. Hands where I can see them." Maya said, "Sheriff, I'm going to need your name, your badge number, and the legal basis for this stop. All three. Right now." There was a pause. You can hear it on the recording. A full 3 seconds where Dale Briggs, 22-year veteran Harlow County Sheriff, had absolutely nothing to say. And then he said, "Who in the hell do you think you are?" And Maya Carter said quietly, without any drama at all, "That's actually a great question, and you're really not going to like the answer." Maya Renee Carter grew up in Decatur, Georgia, third of 4 kids. Her father, Ronald Carter, drove a city bus for 31 years. Her mother, Diane, worked the overnight shift in a hospital laundry facility for 2 decades. They were not wealthy people. They were not connected people. They did not have a family attorney. They did not have anyone to call who could make a problem disappear with a conversation. Maya was not the loudest person in any room she ever walked into. She was the quietest. She was the one in the back, near the wall, saying almost nothing. While she listened to everything, her teachers noted it. Her coaches noted it. Even her siblings noted it. While her brothers and her sister would react, Maya would wait. She would observe. She would collect. And then, when she was ready, she would act. That quality, that stillness, that absolute refusal to respond before she had fully assessed a situation. That is exactly what Dale Briggs underestimated on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and it is exactly what destroyed him. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Think about every black woman you know, in your family, in your life, someone you've seen in a video, someone you've heard about, who has ever been treated like a suspect in a place she had every right to be. Maybe it was a store, maybe it was a neighborhood, maybe it was a traffic stop. Drop her name in the comments, or just drop the word me, because this story is for every single one of them. Maya Carter was 28 years old when this happened. By one measure, she was a young woman alone at a gas station in a small Georgia town that she had never been to before. By every other measure, she was a credentialed federal law enforcement officer, 3 years into her career with the FBI's Atlanta field office, currently assigned to a joint criminal investigations task force operating across 4 counties in northern Georgia. She was in Harlow County on assignment. The black Ford Expedition she was driving, the one Sheriff Briggs decided without evidence had been stolen, was a government-issued federal vehicle registered to the United States Department of Justice. It had federal plates, standard issue, visible to anyone who looked. Briggs apparently did not look, or he looked and did not care. Either answer tells you everything you need to know. Maya had spent 6 years building toward the moment she was now standing inside. And the story of how she got there does not begin at Quantico, or at her first day with the Bureau, or even at her college graduation. It begins on a Tuesday night when Maya was 19 years old, sitting in her mother's living room, watching her mother cry. Her younger brother Darius had been pulled over on his way home from campus. The officer who stopped him told him the car he was driving matched the description of a stolen vehicle. The car Darius was driving was their mother's 2009 Honda Accord, registered in Diane Carter's name, insured, legal, not stolen, not even close to stolen. There was no reported stolen vehicle matching that description in the system that night. The officer had simply seen a young black man man in a car and made a decision. Darius, who was 18, who had never been arrested, who was pre-law at Georgia State, spent 4 hours in the back of a squad car on the side of a highway while his mother drove 45 minutes in the middle of the night to prove ownership of her own property. 4 hours, 18 years old, on the side of a road, for nothing. Maya sat with her mother that night after Darius came home. She watched her mother's hands shake while she poured her tea. She watched her brother stare at the wall. She felt something settle in her chest. Not rage, not grief. Something quieter and more permanent than both of those things. A decision. She was going to make sure that never happened to her family again, and she was going to learn exactly how. At 24, Maya applied to the FBI Academy at Quantico. She was rejected the first time. She reapplied. She was accepted. She completed the 21-week training program and graduated in the top 12% of her class. At Quantico, they trained her body. They trained her instincts. They trained her firearm accuracy and her tactical movement and her interrogation technique. But Maya had also been quietly training herself in the years before and the years after in something that the academy didn't formally grade, and that most law enforcement officers never bother to study at all. She had spent hundreds of hours studying civil rights law, not from a textbook overview, from the source. She had read Title 42, Section 1983, the federal civil rights statute that makes it illegal for anyone acting under the color of law to violate your constitutional rights. She had studied Terry versus Ohio, the Supreme Court case that established the legal standard for an investigatory stop, what an officer must be able to articulate specifically and concretely to justify detaining someone. She had read Illinois vs. Wardlow. She had read Wren vs. United States. She had read the case law and the commentary and the federal guidance documents that most people never know exist. She had also studied something more practical. She had learned, in precise and specific detail, exactly how to document a civil rights violation in real time, in a way that would survive federal review. What to say, what not to say, what to capture, how to capture it, what language to use, what to record in writing immediately after an encounter while memory was still fresh. She had learned what a well-constructed federal complaint looks like, and what makes the difference between a complaint that gets filed and forgotten and one that forces action. She never talked about this at social gatherings. It wasn't a party trick. It wasn't something she shared over dinner. It was quiet insurance. It was the thing she carried invisibly every single day, hoping she would never need it, knowing one day she probably would. On October 14th, in Harlow County, Georgia, that day arrived. It was a Tuesday, just after 1 in the afternoon. Maya had been on the road since early morning, running the eastern leg of a field coordination route that took her through 4 counties. She was tired, not exhausted. Maya didn't really do exhausted, but the kind of tired where you're aware of your body. She had a protein bar wrapper on the passenger seat. She had case files in a sealed bag in the back. She was thinking about whether she had time to grab real food before her 3 o'clock call. She pulled into the Harlow Fuel and Go on Route 9 just after 1:15. Pump 3 was open. She pulled in, got out, started the pump, and reached back into the truck for her water bottle. She was not thinking about Dale Briggs. She had never heard of Dale Briggs. She had no reason to. She heard the cruiser before she saw it, the engine, then the tires on the lot gravel, then the door. Briggs walked toward her from maybe 30 feet away. Maya saw him coming. She clocked the body language immediately. She was trained to read exactly this: the deliberate pace, the chest forward, the right hand hanging loose near the belt. She recognized it. She had studied it. She had been warned about it by mentors who had experienced it themselves. She felt something in that moment. She would be honest about it later. She felt a flash of something old and familiar, the same tightness her mother must have felt the night she drove 45 minutes on a dark highway to rescue her son. Maya felt it, she acknowledged it, and then she set it aside, because she had trained for this, specifically, precisely, and she was not going to waste a single second of what she had spent years preparing. Briggs stopped about 8 feet from her. He looked at the truck. He looked at her. He said, "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. That truck was reported stolen." Maya did not step away. She stood where she was, weight balanced, hands visible, voice completely level. She said, "By who? When? Give me a case number." Briggs blinked. That's on the recording. An actual physical blink, the kind your body does when it receives information it wasn't expecting. He said, "I'm not giving you anything." I said, "Step away. Hands where I can see them." Maya said, "Sheriff, I'm going to need your name, your badge number, and the legal basis for this stop. All 3, right now." What happened in the next 3 seconds is, in many ways, the entire story, because Briggs went silent. Not briefly silent, a full 3-second silence that you can time on the recording. He had expected one of 2 responses. He had expected either immediate compliance or immediate panic. He had likely dealt with both, many times in 22 years. He had a script for both. He had no script for what Maya Carter was doing. She was calm. She was specific. She was using language, legal language, precise language, that told him she knew exactly what the rules of this encounter were, and that she was already holding him to them. I want you to understand something about that moment, because it's easy to watch it and think it's about bravado. It's easy to think Maya was showing off or trying to escalate or being combative. She was doing none of those things. She was doing something harder and more important than any of that. She was protecting herself, methodically, legally, without giving Briggs a single thing he could use against her. She was controlling the encounter without ever raising her voice. That is not defiance. That is mastery. Briggs finally responded. He said, "I don't need to justify anything to you. You match the description. The vehicle matches the description. I'm asking you one more time to step away." Maya said, "What description? Specifically? Can you articulate it?" Another pause. Shorter this time. He said, "Black female, late 20s, driving a dark SUV, stolen from a rental lot in Macon 2 days ago." Maya said, "This vehicle has federal government plates, Department of Justice. You can read them from where you're standing. Have you run the plates?" Silence. She said it again, quietly. "Have you run the plates, Sheriff?" He hadn't, and they both knew it. I want to stop here for a second, because I need you to understand what is happening at this point in the encounter. Dale Briggs has stopped a woman at a gas station. He has accused her of driving a stolen vehicle. He has not run the plates. He has not confirmed a case number. He has not done the one basic, automatic, first-step action that every law enforcement officer in America is trained to do before approaching a vehicle in a suspected theft situation. He just walked up to a black woman at a pump and told her to step away from her car. That is not a mistake. That is not an oversight. That is a pattern. And Maya Carter knew it was a pattern because she had read the Harlow County complaint logs before she ever drove through Harlow County. It was part of her field prep. She knew that Dale Briggs had 17 civilian complaints filed against him over 14 years. 12 of those complaints involved Black or Latino residents. 9 of them involved some version of the same accusation. Stop without basis, no documented probable cause, intimidation during the encounter. 17 complaints, 0 disciplinary actions. Because none of those 17 people knew what Maya Carter knew. Not one of them had the language the system is required to respond to. And Dale Briggs had spent 14 years counting on that gap. He had built an entire way of operating around the assumption that the person on the other side of his badge didn't know their rights, couldn't articulate a violation, and wouldn't file something a federal investigator could actually use. He was right. Every single time. Until today, Briggs called for backup. 2 deputies arrived within 6 minutes. Maya documented their arrival, badge numbers, vehicle numbers, time on her watch. She said nothing beyond what was necessary. She answered no questions she was not legally required to answer. She did not raise her voice. She did not reach for anything without announcing it first. She did not give them a single frame of footage that could be misread. One of the deputies, younger, visibly uncomfortable, ran the plates while Briggs stood with his arms crossed. The deputy looked at his screen. Then he looked at Briggs. Then he looked at his screen again. He said quietly, "Sheriff, these are DOJ plates. Federal government vehicle." Briggs said nothing. The deputy said, "It's not in the system as stolen. It's registered to the Department of Justice." The gas station had gone completely quiet. There were 2 other cars at the pumps. Nobody was moving. Maya Carter looked at Dale Briggs. She reached slowly into her jacket pocket. She said, "I'm reaching for my credentials. I'm going to show them to you now." She produced her badge case. FBI, Special Agent, Maya R. Carter, Atlanta Field Office. She held it open and let him read it. The color left his face. She said, "I have been recording this encounter since you stepped out of your vehicle. I have your badge number, the time of your approach, your stated basis for the stop, and your acknowledgement that you had not run the plates before you approached me. I want you to know, so there is no confusion later, that I am going to be filing a federal civil rights complaint regarding this stop before the end of today. If either of your deputies have anything they'd like to add or correct while we're all standing here together, now is the time." Nobody said a word. Maya finished pumping her gas, checked the cap, got in the truck, pulled out of the lot. She had a 3 o'clock call to make. That evening, at 6:47 p.m., Maya Carter sat in her hotel room in Gainesville, Georgia, with her laptop open and a legal pad beside her. She had already written 4 pages of handwritten notes. Times, verbatim quotes, badge numbers, vehicle descriptions, the names of every person present. She had transferred her audio recording to a secure federal drive. She had pulled up the Harlow County public complaint records she had already accessed in her pre-deployment research. What she produced that night was not just a complaint. It was a documented evidence package, a timeline, annotated by law. Every moment of the encounter cross-referenced with the specific statute or case law it potentially violated. Terry v. Ohio. Failure to articulate reasonable suspicion before the stop. Fourth Amendment. The stop itself. Title 42, Section 1983. Civil rights violation under color of law. She included the 17 prior complaints. She included the pattern. She included the fact that Briggs had failed to run federal plates before approaching a vehicle he claimed was stolen, and that this failure was not incidental, but consistent with a documented history of stops made without evidentiary basis. She submitted the complaint to the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and to the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council. She had no guarantee it would go anywhere. She had no political leverage. She was 28 years old and filing against a 22-year incumbent sheriff in his own county. She knew what usually happened to complaints like this, but she had done everything right. She had the recording, she had the documentation, she had the law cited precisely on her side, and she had built something that was very, very hard to ignore. The DOJ Civil Rights Division received her filing at 11:52 p.m. on October 14th. It was flagged for priority review the following morning, not because of Maya's status as an agent. The complaint was reviewed deliberately on its own merits, independent of her position. It was flagged because the documentation was extraordinary. A senior investigator later described it internally as the most thoroughly constructed civilian-style complaint she had seen in 11 years. Every claim supported, every timestamp verified, every relevant statute cited correctly, and a prior pattern of misconduct attached with source documentation. Within 72 hours, a formal federal inquiry into Dale Briggs and the Harlow County Sheriff's Department had been opened. Within 9 days, Briggs was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Within 6 weeks, the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council completed its parallel review. The findings were unambiguous. The stop lacked any documentable reasonable suspicion. The failure to run plates before approach was indefensible. The pattern of prior complaints, when viewed together with the documented behavior in this encounter, established a systemic practice rather than an isolated incident. Dale Briggs resigned on a Wednesday morning in December. 22 years. Done. The Harlow County Commission, under pressure from the state and the ongoing federal review, announced a mandatory retraining program for all department personnel and the appointment of an independent civilian oversight board, the first in the county's history, and then the footage came out. The recording ran 4 minutes and 12 seconds. It was released as part of the public findings. It spread the way footage spreads when it shows something people already suspected but had never seen so clearly. Within 48 hours, 40 million views, covered by national outlets, legal commentary channels, civil rights organizations, law enforcement accountability advocates. The clip of Maya saying, "Have you run the plates, Sheriff?" was shared by itself on its own hundreds of thousands of times, but the responses that meant the most, that Maya would later say she sat with for a long time, were not the view counts. They were the messages. From black women who said they had been stopped the same way and had no idea they had any recourse. From parents who said they were going to teach their children what Maya had done. From people who said they had filed complaints years ago that went nowhere and were now going to refile them with the kind of documentation they hadn't known was possible. From a woman in Mississippi who said her son had been stopped 6 times in 3 years and she had just spent the night learning what Terry v. Ohio meant. Maya read every one of them. What Maya Carter's story reveals, underneath the footage, underneath the 4 minutes and 12 seconds, is something that the clip alone doesn't fully show. Dale Briggs had 17 prior complaints, 14 years of documented behavior, and in every single one of those cases before Maya's, the complaint either was never formally filed or was filed in a way that gave the department room to dismiss it. Not because those people were wrong, not because they didn't have a legitimate grievance, but because they didn't have the language. They didn't know what statute had been violated. They didn't know what case law applied. They didn't know how to document an encounter in real time in a way that a federal investigator could act on. So Briggs kept going. Year after year, because the system he was operating within has a gap in it, a gap between the rights people legally have and the knowledge of how to use them. And certain people, certain officers, certain institutions have built entire careers on that gap, staying exactly where it is. Maya's case worked not because she was an FBI agent. That is the part people misunderstand. She did not reveal her badge at the beginning. She did not invoke federal authority to make him back down. She spent the entire encounter doing exactly what any informed, prepared civilian could do, invoking rights by name, requesting legally required information, documenting in real time. The badge came out at the end. The work happened before it. That is the point. That is the whole point. Here is the question I want you to sit with. Should this knowledge, your right to ask for a legal basis for a stop, your right to document an encounter, the specific language that makes a complaint impossible to ignore, should that be taught in schools? Should it be as standard as knowing how to write a resume or file your taxes? Comment yes or no, and tell me why. Because I think the answer matters more than almost anything else we could argue about today. Maya Carter today is still with the FBI. She has not spoken publicly about the case beyond a single written statement released through the Bureau's press office. In it, she said, and I want to read this exactly, I did what I was trained to do. I also did what any person in that situation had the right to do. My hope is that the difference between those two things becomes smaller, that more people know what I knew when I pulled into that gas station, not because they should have to, but because until the gap closes on the other side, knowledge is the only protection that travels with you everywhere you go. Dale Briggs is no longer in law enforcement. He has not made any public statements. The Harlow County Civilian Oversight Board held its first meeting in February. 11 residents attended. One of them was a woman who had filed a complaint against Briggs's department 4 years earlier that went nowhere. She brought the complaint with her, newly annotated, to submit for re-review. I want to talk to you directly for a moment, not about Maya, not about Briggs, about you. If you are watching this, there is a reason. Maybe you have been in a version of this situation. Maybe someone you love has. Maybe you have always carried a quiet fear that if the moment ever came, you wouldn't know what to do, that you would freeze or comply when you shouldn't have to, or say the wrong thing, or walk away with your rights violated and no idea how to do anything about it. Here is what Maya Carter's story tells me about that fear. It is not weakness. It is a gap between what you have every legal right to know and use, and what you have had the opportunity to learn. That gap can be closed. It takes time. It takes effort, but it is learnable. Maya closed it over years, through books and case law and self-study, and a brother left on the side of a road at 18 years old. She closed it quietly, without announcing it, and carried it with her everywhere. And when the moment came, she was ready.